Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Greet your neighbors. Our invitation today will be given by Beth Weaver.
So Chris Bradham was actually scheduled to give the invocation, and obviously Chris Bradham from McIntyre, Bradham and Sleek, was not able to make it because they're so busy. 10 deaths since Thursday. So I think this invocation, being grateful for the day, is very apropos. But he sent this along for me to read. With our friends beside us and no person beneath us, with the bonds of Rotary between us and our worries behind us, with our goals before us and no task beyond us, with the thirst of knowledge and a dream of a thriving free world, we are thankful for our Rotary friends and for the meal that we share. Amen.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome back, everyone. Good to see everybody back this week. Just a couple of quick announcements here. So just a reminder, and I mentioned this last week, my screen was set here. But Ohio Light Opera Night on June 18th. So that was included again in my weekly email, and I put the order form in the email, so you can just print that out and either give that to us up front or give it to Laura Neal, or you can mail it to the box office there. So we're looking forward to that. I'm going to make one more plug here today for the spring pipe marking. Cheryl's going to be pulling down addresses here just in a few days to assign to the individuals that signed up for this. So again, this is a real easy job to do. So Cheryl will get those out probably later this week, and then you'll basically have about a 2-week time period to do it on your own time. You just get a list of addresses, you go out, you see if you can find the pipe, you remark the pipe. We typically have bags of supplies ready to go out at our facility, so you just swing by there. We keep them outside in a little tub there. So a really easy job, but again, the more people that we have doing it, the less addresses for each person that signed up. So we could really use like 10 more people. So if you can, please let me know or let Lee King know. There is a sign up in my weekly email as well if you want to sign up that way. Real easy job, but really something that helps us, because when we remark those pipes, then when we go out and put the flags up for Memorial Day, it's much easier for the groups. It makes troubleshooting a lot easier for that first holiday. So very important task. Does anybody know who those two guys are? Dave, do you know who? So this picture was sent to me by Phil Starr. Phil is the son-in-law of Chuck Doherty, and said, hey, you might want to share this with your club. So I thought it was interesting. So this looks like perhaps one of the auctions. I can tell the background there is probably Fisher Auditorium. So this was probably in the early days of the auction, but Dave and Chuck there checking out the piano for the auction. Your little piece of history today, May 9th, 1974, Bruce Springsteen performed a concert in Cambridge, Mass. And at the time there was a famous rock critic, John Landau, who wrote, I saw rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. So that was today in 1974. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tim and the Secretary's report.
I think Dave and Chuck have been part of that rock and roll area, that piano. Well, welcome back to week number 2 of my Back by Unpopular Demand tour. Has anybody heard from Lynn? I start taking applications about you. I can't do this forever. Well, I have a guest today. It's my lovely wife, Lisa. I think she's here to hear our classification talk. And we've got the guest up here, Nally Ramsar has a guest.
My guest today is my husband, Josiah Ramsar.
That's my son-in-law, if you hadn't figured that out. And I feel like I always have to apologize to everyone who got behind him in the food line. So if you didn't get enough to eat, it's his fault. There are no announcements requested today. How about that, Terry? Pretty easy day. What do we do right now?
So I was going to have Tim stay up here to introduce his daughter Natalie for her classification talk today. Tim?
Thank you, Terry. Welcome back to stage 3 of my Back by Unpopular Demand tour. I feel like before I introduce my daughter, I do need to talk to Gabe here kind of on the side. Now, everybody in this room knows that your predecessor and I had a rivalry right here at the podium. Anytime I got the mic or he got the mic, or something that happened, right? Now, I have it on good authority. There are no pictures, no remarks, or anything about me in your presentation. Okay, now if I can trust that, it's a truce right now. But if anything comes up, it's game on. All right? Okay. Well, Terry, thank you for the opportunity to introduce our classification speaker today. Again, it's my daughter. I'm thrilled. She's a 3rd generation Rotarian, and I think more exciting than anything for me is I knew one day this young lady was going to be a Rotarian, and here it is. Now I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dad, / Mr. Swift. All right, so I'll just jump right in. At cash registers, in college classrooms, and in Uber rides, I was always asked, any relation to Taylor Swift? With a little chuckle, they figured I'd say no, but I always got a surprising eyebrow raise when I said yes. Up until about 8 months ago, in the Wooster community, I wasn't even asked if I was related to Tim Swift. It was mostly a known fact, and I was often met with an all-out laugh, maybe a chuckle, and a poor child. By now, most of you know that I am Tim Swift's daughter. Although I don't plan to spend most of my classification talk speaking of him, he is a large part of the reason I stand before you today as a new member of the Wooster Rotary Club. Not only is he my dad and my sponsor, but a large part of my passion for being involved and active in my local community. Let's title phase 1 of my involvement in Rotary, Secretary to the Secretary. Phase 1 began when I was around 8 years old. I was tasked with stuffing and stamping statements, making up new member packets, etc. Now we know how we all did it. Outsource the labor. Phase 2, I would call being a mini member. This phase involved helping at auctions, ringing bells for the Salvation Army, and putting up flags. I have to say, helping at the auction is probably one of my favorite childhood memories. I started backstage marking S for sold on all the items, but eventually got promoted to Vanna White on stage alongside Margaret Braille. Phase 3, career connections. Relationships made in this club were vital to my development as a young adult. I job shadowed Dr. Biggio in the Want to Be Dentist days, worked on a 4-H project at Bueller's with the help of Mary McMillan, and called up Samira Zimmerly to talk about her career path. With a solid foundation of confidence and making connections, it was time for me to find my own way away from Wooster. After graduating from Central Christian High School, I went on to study marketing and event planning at the University of Finley. I knew my interest in trade show and convention planning had started when I first attended the Rotary International Convention in London in 2012 alongside Dad and Mom. I knew after that I wanted my career to focus on connecting people in business fields, further their learning opportunities, and refresh their palate for what they do every day by attending one of these events. During the spring semester of my senior year of college, I got the incredible opportunity to work at the Country Music Association in Nashville, Tennessee as a special events intern. I moved to Nashville in January 2019, and needless to say, I loved it because I ended up staying south for 2 years rather than 6 months. Working at CMA was an incredibly interesting and rewarding job with some fun perks like meeting some famous country artists, although none of them Taylor Swift. I ultimately landed with Freeman Nashville, a global trade show and event planning company, planning shows at the Opryland Hotel and Music City Convention Center. Needless to say, this was also a dream job for me. Hired in July 2019, laid off March 17, 2020. I don't think I need to explain that one to you. April through November 2020, I applied for a total of 163 jobs, and wouldn't you know, I ended up back in my hometown of Wooster, Ohio. Although the beginning of my job search started in Nashville, I switched focus to Ohio where my now husband, Josiah, and I got engaged in August. He was and still is a design engineer at Venture Products in Orville. He was also obtaining his master's degree, so all roads really pointed to us making our home back in our hometown. I'm sure it had to be at the guidance of my parents that I called Mary McMillan at Certified ASP to ask if there were any job openings. Mary had retired, but I happened to have another connection at the company, Carrie Weller. Carrie was one half of the video team that Rotary had hired to man the cameras at the auction on the main stage. I called up Carrie a few weeks later in December of 2020, accepted a job offer at Certified ASP, and that's where I've been ever since. When you think about it, there's almost a romantic relationship that people have with beef. You almost never hear anyone reminisce about fish or chicken. But a great steak or a perfect burger, that's something you remember and want to share with your friends. At the very heart of it, that's what drove the founders to create the Certified Angus Beef brand. So now our mission is twofold. One, increase demand for registered Angus cattle, therefore supporting farmers and ranchers across the country. And two, drive demand for the best beef to retailers and restaurants around the world. This was done through creating specification and science-based beef standards that are in today in packers and distributors across the country. Because we want to maintain the high-quality image of this great brand, not everyone who buys the beef is allowed to advertise it as such. So, as a brand engagement specialist, I work to review restaurant and retail partners and also help them advertise Certified Angus beef in a way that allows them to maximize on their investment in the brand and increase their customer return rate. I do this with international and domestic food service, e-commerce, and distributor partners. Although this may seem like a far cry from the event planning focus I started with, I tend to look at my job as if each onboarding process is its own mini event. It needs to give the partners opportunities to learn about the brand and their customers. It needs to connect them with like-minded individuals, and it needs to renew their passion for what they do every day, whether that's wrapping meat or waiting on customers. As you can see, Rotary has been woven into almost every part of my life, and through God's greater plan, led me to a caring company with a phenomenal culture in Wooster, a house with a husband in Orville, and now as a third-generation Rotarian in the same club as my dad. Let's call this phase 4, becoming a real Rotarian. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. It's really great to see young people coming into the club. So appreciate you coming back to Wooster. And I know that you'll definitely be a great asset to this club going forward. So we appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Chris Boone to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Tier. Gabe Tudor became the superintendent of the Wooster City School District in July 2021. Before coming to Wooster, he served as the assistant superintendent at Wadsworth City Schools. And prior to that, he was the principal of Buckeye High School in Medina. Mr. Tudor earned his master's degree in educational administration from the University of Akron and his superintendent licensure from the National University. In his 17 years in education, Mr. Tudor has also taught social studies and coached basketball and tennis in addition to his administrative duties. He and his wife, Rachel, have 4 children who are also studying in Wooster City Schools. When asked about becoming the superintendent for Wooster, Gabe was quoted as saying, "Wooster is the type of district that you hope to lead as a superintendent due to its community support, tradition, and fiscal responsibility. It is an exciting time to collaborate with stakeholders to determine how to set Wooster up for success for the next 30 years. Mr. Gabe Tudor.
Well,
thank you, Dr. Boone and Rotary, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. I was thinking, when I did my classification talk, Terry, you didn't say it was nice to have young new members. So I guess I've kind of moved past that stage at this point. But really excited to share with you today what has really started prior to my arrival. And then we have really kind of started or really kind of got back into it as COVID kind of delayed a process for a period of time. I want to tell you where we're at with our master plan. So to start, there's about 37 members on our master planning committee. They have met with me sometimes twice a month, at least once a month, starting in September. So teachers, parents, administrators, community members, architects, and construction consultants. And we have discussed a variety of topics from grade levels, which I'll talk about in a little bit, between neighborhood and grade level schools, building condition, enrollment trends, socioeconomic issues. Really have enjoyed that process with our team. I feel like we've had some really great conversations. We haven't all seen eye to eye at all times, and we've been able to really kind of evaluate and make a recommendation to the board based on a lot of conversation and different interests. So I think the first thing to kind of keep everybody up to speed on is where we're at in our process. So our process is not completed, okay? So there are things that we have done, and there's plenty of things that are left to do. So first, in terms of what has been completed, our master planning committee has made a final recommendation from the committee for board consideration. We did that at our April work session, I think April 16th. The board has not put that on an agenda to vote yet. They could do that as early as our May regular meeting, May 26th, or they could choose to continue to wait until they're ready to weigh in on that at a board level. My purpose today is to help you understand what that committee's recommendation is. We also have done 4 master planning sessions where we've allowed community to come in and ask questions and provide feedback for them from the, at different times. We did 2 downtown and we did 2 at the high school. We also have an informational flyer that's on our website, and we also have lots of documents on our website on our tab. We actually have a tab that is facilities master planning, and it has meeting notes, assessments, and a variety of other things that, if you get more interested after today and have some questions, you might find some answers there. You can always also just contact me and I'll provide as much information as I can. So that's what's been done. What hasn't been done at this point is, as I said, the board has not taken action on that committee recommendation. Okay, that would be the first step. So right now you've got a committee that's made a recommendation. The board will at some point decide to vote on that recommendation. And then if approved, then the next thing the board will have to decide is if and when you go to the community to ask for financial assistance to enact that plan. Okay, so you could get a committee recommendation and wait several years before you actually say, hey, let's go out and enact this plan. You could right away, you could have a committee recommendation and then go out and ask your tax base to provide that. So that next decision would be the bond, all right, that we'll make after that. Once they feel that it would be appropriate to go and engage the voters, at that point, that's when you select an architectural firm to get farther with you into the design process. We have used an architectural firm in master planning. GPD out of Akron has helped us with that. But there's a whole nother selection process when you then go out and decide that you're going to build those buildings. Right now, our buildings look like little rectangles. So you're moving from little rectangles to what those buildings really look like. And that will be a whole nother level of building design and engagement from the community. And that's a fun stage because you're really getting to look and talk about what you want your new buildings to look like and how you want them to best serve kids. And so that's a whole nother level of stakeholder engagement that is really important to us. Okay, so in the end, the committee actually created a 2-phase recommendation process for the board to consider. Phase 1, the committee decided to recommend to build a new middle school on our high school campus. So that would be grades 6 through 8. So one of the things I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute is, right now we have 8th grade at our high school. That was moved about 10 plus years ago. And it was due to enrollment changes that we were dealing with, kind of as Rubbermaid exited and we were having some enrollment decline. And so as we closed some other buildings, we moved 8th grade to the high school. And that's been a positive thing. At the same time, I think if you ask most teachers and students, 8th grade in an area where you can benefit from the high school instructionally and be able to go take classes if need be and those kind of things is great. But at the same time, not being at the high school with seniors is probably a good thing. Also in phase 1 is a new primary building, which would be a pre-K2 building at Cornerstone. With that, we would be recommending to maintain the play lab and the preschool and the gymnasium above it. So the preschool has had some renovation. Another reason we want to keep the gymnasium is that the community the Cornerstone gym is used constantly. And any new building we build, and I'll talk about funding here in a little bit, it would be very likely that the funding we would receive would be for a much smaller elementary style gymnasium, which would be fine if we were only wanting to use it for the school. But knowing that there's so much community use of Cornerstone, we want to try to keep that space. Okay, so that's phase 1. Phase 2 would happen years later. And I'll explain that in our funding portion, but phase 2 would be a new intermediate building, which would be a 3 through 5th grade or intermediate elementary school. And that location hasn't been determined yet. We kind of narrowed it down to 2 places, but the committee kind of wants to take some time and think through that. And considering that's not phase 1, we haven't made a final recommendation there. And that would be having that building either at Parkview or on the high school campuses. I'll show you some renderings of what that could look like here in a second about where those buildings could be located. So our middle school, this is just one example of where we might put this building. What we do know for sure is that we're recommending putting it at the high school campus. What you're looking at right there is you are looking at the area straight north of Follis Field. So technically there are 2 parcels of land there. There is land on your left or on the west that was owned by Jerry Craycraft, which the board actually voted to purchase at our April meeting. And we're in the process of closing right now, and that's 15 acres. And then the land that you're looking at that has the rendering for the middle school as a potential site is actually owned by the Noble Foundation. And the Noble Foundation has expressed an interest to hold or keep that land or sell that land to us. So in theory, pretty much one of the visions of Master Planning Committee and the Board of Education is to own pretty much the 32 acres that are straight north of the high school. Okay, it goes out to Milltail Road. So pretty much everything from the parsonage and that small church over to Commerce Drive. Okay, that would be the 32 acres that between those 2 properties that we feel would benefit the school district from now and for many years to come. It's one of the exciting parts about this process is really trying to think about what your school district 50 years from now. Right? I mean, in the end, you're making those decisions now, but when you think about it, what you want to do is you want to put your community in a position of success for multiple generations. And so we feel that that land, whether we build on it right away or build on part of it right away, and then other parts later, is a real benefit for us to hold. So that's a potential area of the middle school. This is a rendering of what it potentially could look like at Cornerstone. So again, nothing but squares right now and rectangles. But you can see that the new pre-K through 2 building would be there at Cornerstone with basically an entrance in the same location as our current Cornerstone building. And then some additional parking, as right now Cornerstone holds about 400 students, and we would be putting about 1,000 students if you go grades pre-K through 2. So you would need some additional parking and some additional egress. And then a couple examples of where the 3 through 5 building could go in the long run. This is if we build it at Parkview. You can kind of see there on the right what our rendering could look like. Where again, you're going to have about 900 students, which right now Parkview has about 300 and some students. So we have mixed feelings on the Parkview site as our 3rd through 5th grade building. The positive is we do like kind of that shared north-south representation. It's not everything on the north side. It's one of the reasons why Cornerstone is being built, and I'll explain that further. But at the same time, one concern is if you ever are driving on Oak Hill at arrival or dismissal in Parkview, it's kind of hard a little bit to think about how we're going to put another 600 kids there, considering it's already a pretty challenging traffic flow there at Parkview. Another option that we would consider, if we decided to build 2 buildings in the high school campus, you can kind of see how an elementary and middle school both fit just to the area north of Falls Field there, where you could build a 6th through 8 middle school and a new elementary school on that site. So one of the things that you can kind of see here as we make these recommendations, and I'll go into the explanation of the why on this next, is that this is a framework. This is a framework that the committee created based on the information that they had at hand. The next task will be obviously the board deciding what they want to do with that framework. And little by little, this will start to look a lot more concrete, right? So let's talk a little bit about this phase 1, phase 2, and I'll kind of help you understand how Edgewood Middle School plays into this. So the reason that we are recommending this in a 2-phase process is primarily due to state funding and the ability to reduce the overall burden of taxpayers. Okay, so the OFCC, which is the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, has been around for about 25 years. Started in the late 90s. Originally, it was through money from the tobacco settlement, and then has continued to be funded by the state every year. They will help any district in Ohio do an assessment of their current properties, and will, depending on the needs that they feel that you have, will provide a co-funded percentage for anything that you build. Now, when they do that, one of the things that they do is they say, this is what we would tell you to build. And then if you build anything beyond that, they'll give you their amount based on their recommendations. So let's use an example. So like if Triway wanted to build 2 buildings instead of 1, the OFCC would have given them X amount of dollars. But their recommendation for Triway was to build 1 school because that was the most cost effective, right? So you can go beyond that. We call that locally funded initiative, or LFI, but it would change your co-funded amount, okay? So the OFCC, we are on their list, but considering it's somewhat free money, nothing is completely free, but somewhat free money, we are not the only school on that list, because we're about number 408 on that list of school districts that are asking for money from the state, okay? So by the time our number comes available to co-fund our project, it's probably at least 8 years away. Anywhere between 8 and 12 is what we're anticipating. And so with that being said, one thing that the state will allow you to do is start your project and basically build a credit of the money they owe you, okay? So when we recommended if we would go out and build phase 1 of the first 2 buildings, we anticipate that cost to be about $70 million. Our OFCC co-funded amount is 33%, okay? So that means that of that 70 million, we will build a co-funded portion that we can then use to build a 3rd building when our number comes up, okay? So I don't want to say it's as simple as 3 buildings for the price of 2. I don't know if that's accurate, but the reality is that we can ask for that and build 1, go to the voters here at the beginning, and hopefully not have to ask for near as much or any when that 3rd building comes available, all right? In terms of our process of when we want to build these, our recommendation would be to build the middle school first. We would build the middle school at the high school campus right away. We think that is such a great place to do that because we want to continue to have the benefits of the middle school students having access to high school courses, also the athletic and other things that kind of go on there from shared spaces. So we want to build that first. As soon as we built that building, we would move the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to that building, to the new middle school, which would free up Edgewood Middle School. At that time, we would then move the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to Edgewood, which would become their temporary home for about 10 years, okay, at least 10 years until we finished our construction project. All right. Why does Edgewood matter and why does it make sense as that space? Well, of all of our buildings, it's probably been renovated the most recent other than the high school. It has the space to fit 3 full grade levels. And also, we are actually spending some federal ESSER money, which is the money through the COVID relief funds, to improve its air quality and air conditioning, which it doesn't really have. So we're putting air conditioning Edgewood to make it a more manageable space. And we're able to do that without taking any money from our actual general fund in our budget. So then, after we built the middle school and the kids go to Edgewood that are in 3, 4, or 5, we would then recommend moving forward with building at Cornerstone. Okay, the Cornerstone building would be pre-K through 2. It would take about 2 years to build. So you'd have a couple years there where you would continue to use Melrose, Parkview, and Keene to house the kindergarten, first, and second graders. After that time, we haven't made official recommendations of what would happen to those buildings, but in summary, Melrose, Parkview, and Keene in its current state are not a part of our master plan recommendation. So you're going to end up moving from a 6-building campus to a 4-building campus. Okay. So there were lots of reasons why we made these decisions, and all of these were discussed in detail as we came to the conclusion that I'm sharing with you today. But to go through a few of them in summary, one of the decisions that we kind of came to the conclusion to rebuild in these locations and to also consolidate our number of buildings is school safety. We do a great job of keeping our schools as safe as they possibly can in the current structure. And we have a wonderful police department, fire department that we collaborate with on a regular basis. But the reality is, unfortunately, all of our buildings, even the high school, but then there was significant renovation to address it, were built prior to the realization that unfortunately there are people in this world that sometimes just want to go and hurt people at school for no real reason, right? And so we live in what we call in the education world post-Columbine time. So if you notice it, if you go into most of our schools open, the doors are obviously locked, but once you buzz in, you're in a hallway, you're not in an office area. Most buildings built post-Columbine are built in a different structure to kind of be another layer of protection. So we feel that that's important. Another reason that we've recommended this change to go what I would call to a grade level approach versus a neighborhood school. So neighborhood schools, especially the Wooster of 30 years ago, was a great example of neighborhood schools, right? You went to an elementary school for 5 or 6 years, and it was based on where you grew up. Your location determined where you went to school, right? Now we have 4 elementary schools. I don't know that I would call them neighborhood schools anymore, considering some of them are miles away. I mean, you live on Fry Road, you go to Park, you know that that's a neighborhood school. But the reality is they're still kind of based on your location. Moving to a grade level approach from a staffing standpoint greatly helps our teachers better serve our students. Right now, if we want to put all of our second grade team together to talk about kind of learning loss and the impacts of the pandemic, we can do that, but it is challenging, and it's multiple buildings and organizations in order to do that, where if they're all at the same building, it's simply calling a meeting. It's simply talking through that. So there's a lot of benefits, we think, from an instructional standpoint to putting our kids in a grade level approach. We also think that even though we may not grow as much as other areas of the United States, that Wooster is going to see continued growth. And if we see continued growth, we have multiple buildings that would be an issue. For example, our 8th grade fits at the high school right now. It won't fit at the high school if we have additional growth. We talk about, you've seen housing projects and different things, and the job needs here and housing development. We anticipate that we will have some continued growth. And our last census showed that, right? The Ohio as a whole grew about 1%, while Worcester grew over 4%. So we would anticipate that even though maybe in general people aren't having quite as many kids as they were before, so it may not be exactly the same ratio of growth, we do anticipate that. We see that other places as well. If any of you have kids at Keene Elementary, you would definitely see this. At this point, library is on a cart. We have a 4th grade classroom in a library, and we have another classroom that uses the stage, right? we're kind of running out of room in some of our buildings because of kind of where the developments are going within the community. We think 21st century learning is another great reason why we've made this recommendation. The one thing I would say is I feel very confident that regardless of what space you put our teachers in, they're going to teach your kids well. That's not what defines good teaching. At the same time, there are things, as we've learned, that as kids have kind of needed more flexibility. There's been a lot of changes in terms of, you know, special education services and different things. We are seeing the need for more flexible spacing to kind of help us better serve the needs of kids. So one of the things that would probably come more into that design phase when we start engaging with an architectural firm and working through it is you would see a lot more like classrooms with like shared open spaces outside of classrooms. There's a lot more pull in, push out support for students in kind of a newer type environment where right now we just kind of have to use the classrooms as is. It's kind of all, you know, traditional classroom with a hallway. So we're kind of thinking that could be a benefit as well to us. One of the more passionate decisions of why I think we've made these recommendations to you is the concept of student athletes. So right now at Cornerstone Elementary, about 75% of our student population qualifies for free and reduced lunch, where at Keene, it's around 30%. So in education, one of the biggest impacts to student learning is the barriers of poverty. Right? It's not always poverty itself. Sometimes it's the barriers that creates. But one thing that we know is studies have shown us that putting kids together at different ability levels and different socioeconomic levels overall leads to higher achievement for all. So we think that from an academic standpoint, we really support that. But we also, from even just an experience standpoint, teaching at Cornerstone versus teaching at Keene, very different. Going to school at Keene versus Cornerstone is very different, but we're all Wooster generals, and we feel passionate about that. So that was another reason why we felt that this recommendation was important. And that also leads to the recommendation of Cornerstone. So one of the things, and if you've read the paper or come to one of our feedback sessions, probably the area of our plan so far that I've gotten the most concern on is Cornerstone Elementary. It's a beautiful building. It turns 100 years old here, I think, this year. We talked a great deal about what to do with that building. And in the end, our committee felt that having a presence on the true south end of town, especially as our community continues to grow north, we felt that that was very important. One of the neat things about Cornerstone right now is the number of people, especially in kind of some of our poverty areas, that can access Cornerstone by foot, right? We have a lot of meetings and different things that we can use that place as a resource. So that was the reason originally that we're like, we've got to continue to keep a presence at Cornerstone instead of just moving all of our buildings to the north end, or maybe even building a Parkview and maybe letting Cornerstone the building stay, somebody else use it for something else. Then comes the decision of rebuilding versus renovating that space. So we are currently, one of the reasons why the board did not officially vote in April is due to the feedback we got from some of the community. We requested a second analysis. So in 2018, the OFCC came in, and again, they're pretty non-biased. They're just whatever's the lowest cost. That's what they're going to tell you. They determined that all of our buildings, except the high school, they would recommend rebuilding versus renovating. They use a phrase of the 2/3 rule. So anytime that you have, it's going to cost you more than 2/3 the cost to rebuild in order to renovate, they're going to recommend that you rebuild. Cornerstone currently, in the 2018 study, and we're waiting for the updated results. If that has been completed, I just don't have the documents yet, so they haven't really assessed it, is about 86%. So about $40 million-ish to renovate and about $45 million-ish to rebuild, okay? So financially, we feel that it's in our best interest from a taxpayer and a school and efficiency standpoint to rebuild that building. Now, one of the things that I know the board is considering, and the committee did talk about in great detail, but really this would be the next level, this would be at the board level, is what can we do to try to continue to keep the historical significance of Cornerstone, while at the same time using taxpayer dollars to meet the needs of our kids in the best way that we know how. And so there's a couple different things that we've talked about. Sometimes you'll see architects that will build new buildings to replicate old buildings. Obviously with everything just kind of being new and efficient. Another option that we actually are considering, if it can be done, and I have seen it done in others, we actually used an example from Lakewood. Lakewood had this example about 10 or 15 years ago, and they actually tore down the building behind, and they kept the front facade of the building, and they rebuilt behind it. It cost a little bit more, but in comparison to the cost of a whole new building, it's nothing, and that's something we could consider to do. Those are all decisions that a board could do that we would be called locally funded initiatives, or LFI, right? The government's not going to help us co-fund that, right? But we could, if our community felt that that was important, we could do that. And then this is a little bit more about the aging buildings, as all of our buildings are between about 60 and 100 years old. And we feel that the cost to rebuild is much more prudent than renovating those. And that's also because of the recommendations that we've received. All right. I want to give a couple minutes for questions, but again, I think to summarize to you, so it's a two-phase process. Phase one would be really what the voters would decide on whenever the board feels that that would be appropriate. And then phase two happens 8, 10, 12 years down the road whenever our money comes up from the OFCC. Right now, the board hasn't even voted to approve our community plan, right? That's where we're at this process, or this point in the process.
In your plans, do they include or perhaps mandate the use of energy resources such as geothermal or solar or things like that?
Yeah, so if we, so you always have the choice to partner with the OFCC. You don't have to, but obviously then you lose your co-funding amount. The OFCC requires at the very least to be LEED silver, which does use renewable energy sources and some other things. Oftentimes geothermal is used if it turns out to be that it's available in that area. All right, yeah, I was expecting some more, so I appreciate that. If you have other questions at any time, I know the board is interested in your feedback, as again, this is all part of a process to get us to a finish line. We're not near that place yet. We're in the process of trying to determine if the committee recommendation is what we're going to go with, or if there's any tweaks to that, and we'll keep you apprised as we go from there. I appreciate your time today, and please seek me out if you have other questions.
Thank you, Gabe. We're giving us an update on the master planning. Master planning is very necessary, but I also know very painful. Looking at Dr. Boone here, because we know I was also looking at Amy as the financial guy at Ohio State. It's always great until we get ready to do it. So you know the drill here, but in recognition of your time with us today is our rendition of the Rotary Wheel before we just on back. All right, quick reminder, next week our speaker will be Lisa J. Pettit. She is the superintendent of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. She'll be giving us an update on that facility. So we stand adjourned, Rotarians. See you next week.